要打多久？我讲我们不要做决定，过去是到了门，以后是由20号或者美国的将来的什么总统由他们去决定。就是说，他们要打多久就打多久，一直打到会计胜利。
Welcome to GBS Deep Dive. I'm Najma Minhas. Trump probably slept a little bit better on Friday evening as the Chinese finally said, okay, we'll think about it, to his repeated requests by the administration for talks. In a statement released by the Chinese Commerce Ministry, it said that China was evaluating the United States' offer to talk, saying, China's position is consistent. If you want to fight, we will fight to the end. If you want to talk, our door is wide open. But it also said that Beijing's position remains consistent. It will only engage in negotiations if Washington cancels its tariffs on Chinese goods first. If the United States does not correct its unilateral tariff measures, it means that the United States has no sincerity at all and will further damage the mutual trust between the two sides, the ministry said. Now, while China is opening the door ever so slightly to talk to the United States, it's also working closely with other countries to use the tariff war as a rallying point for other countries to also stand united and defend their rights. As the Chinese foreign minister pointed out during this week's foreign ministers' summit gathering for BRICS countries, they can choose to continue to be enslaved by the United States or the hegemonic power, or rise up together and form a new world order. The Chinese are echoing the opening lines of their national anthem, "Rise up, those who do not want to be slaves." China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, in his speech to his counterparts in BRICS, asked 5 questions, and they clearly reflect the Chinese strategy on how the world needs to deal with the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration. He used strong words regarding allowing the world to regress into a lawless jungle where might makes right, asked whether the BRICS nations should accept that one country's self-interest may override the collective good of all others. His third question to them was, shall we stand idle as international rules are trampled and discarded? And implicitly pointing to Trump's style of bullying to achieve his objectives, Wang Yi asked, will any nation truly be able to protect its own interests through compromise and flinching? And his fifth question, he asked them if they should submit to the unipolar hegemony bent on dominance, or shall we forge a multipolar world built on equality and order? Strong questions that resonated with many of the global South. However, while the chair Brazil issued a statement condemning trade protectionism, saying that they had a serious concern over the prospect of a fragmented global economy and the weakening of multilateralism, they did not name the United States, and they did not issue a joint statement at the conclusion of the summit. In the meantime, in last week, we've seen lots of negative data, economic data, coming out of both the United States and China. Manufacturing activity in April showed that factories in China had experienced their sharpest monthly slowdown in more than a year. But in the United States, Donald Trump's disastrous trade policy is really coming to home to roost in a very bad way. Several economic data points have come out and they all look very negative. Yet, we have Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, saying that it's China that will suffer more than the United States, and arguing that the US holds most of the cards in this game of trade poker. Remember that the history of trade is we are the deficit country. The deficit country has an advantage. They are the surplus country. He's referring to China there. The surplus countries traditionally always lose in any kind of trade escalation.
Chinese tariffs are unsustainable for China. I've seen some very large numbers over the past few days to show if these numbers stay on, Chinese could lose 10 million jobs very quickly. That we are the deficit country. They sell almost 5 times more goods to us than we sell to them. So the onus will be on them to take off these tariffs. They're unsustainable for them.
And the Chinese, well, they've tapped into nationalism and made sure that the Americans understand that they're not going to be browbeaten by a foreign power like they were during what is called the Century of Humiliation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning on April 10th shared on social media a video footage of the chairman Mao Zedong's speech in 1953, and she wrote on the top, "We are Chinese. We are not afraid of provocations. We don't back down." In essence saying that they will endure hardship but will not yield to foreign pressure, which they consider to be unfair given it was a trade war started by the United States. However, on Friday, China has offered an off-ramp to the current hostilities to allow the trade talks to start by sending their equivalent of the drug czar, Wang Xiaohong, to meet US officials for discussions over what they need from China on the fentanyl chemical precursors that the country produces. Now, at this point, the United States needs to wake up and smell the coffee and take up the offer and not try playing hardball when it does not hold the winning cards, despite what Donald Trump may think. What the United States does not need is the kind of false bravado that's being shown by the Treasury Secretary recently when he says that the Chinese business model is built on selling cheap goods to the United States. They sell us about 5 times more than we sell them. Their factories are closing down as we speak. It does not account for what is actually happening on the United States main street, or even in Wall Street. And the Trump administration would do well to remember that. The internet is full of stories about how goods that were set to arrive in the United States are now being sold in China instead, or being exported to other countries around the world. Fears of empty shelves and fewer products have started to worry Americans. People are actually saying we may be facing an economic COVID type scenario. It takes an estimated 20 to 40 days for a container ship to reach the United States ports, and then another 1 to 10 days for goods to travel from the port to the cities inside the country. One report, which has been put out by an asset management group, Apollo, predicts by the middle of May, container ships to the United States ports will come to a dead stop. And by late May, consumers will start to see empty shelves. Donald Trump, when he was asked about the empty shelves, said it's okay. People could buy fewer dolls, maybe 2 instead of 30.
U.S. economy shrank slightly during the first 3 months of the year. President Trump shifting blame.
The number of containers leaving China for the United States have declined. Los Angeles, which receives around 40% of the traffic from China, has already seen around 10% decline. Very soon it's expected that trucking work is going to dry up, and then the warehouses will start doing layoffs because no labor is needed to unload the containers. And then we're going to see the reduced need for shipping labor, who will then get laid off.
According to our own port optimizer, which measures the loadings in Asia, will be down just a little bit over 35% next week compared to last year. And it's a precipitous drop in volume, with a number of major American retailers stopping all shipments.
At the same time, the economic data is starting to show a clear downturn in the US economy. News that came out this week formally suggests that for the first time that the United States may be in a stagflation. Now, this is the worst nightmare scenario that leaves economists waking up frightened during the night. Stagflation means that the country's economic growth is going down, and at the same time, prices are going up. In the first quarter of 2025, the data shows that the US economy declined by negative 0.3%, and that the US private sector jobs grew by only 62,000 jobs. This is the lowest level since July 2024. And at the same time, Americans' confidence in the economic outlook fell this week to the lowest level in 13 years. Now, the stockpiling of inventory that was being done by people before the tariffs hit actually means that the next quarter is likely to be even more brutal. Gregory Daco, who's the chief economist at the Ernst & Young, sees it falling off a cliff. And he explains that what we've actually seen is an artificial pulling forward of demand. And what often lies beyond these pull-forward effects is a cliff. It's a huge problem for a central bank, and right now it's probably keeping Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, up at night. In very simple terms, when a country has a high growth, everyone's flush with money. They're buying products left, right, center, and since not enough products are available, prices start to rise as demand is greater than supply. So the general inflation level starts to rise. Now for the central bank, that's relatively easy to control. They usually increase the interest rates to reduce the inflation, which helps to control any unsustainable growth rate the economy is in. Now in a stagflation, when the prices are already high and the economic growth rate is very low, central banks are very wary of controlling prices through interest rates, because then it's going to further reduce the economic growth and potentially create a recession. Hence, it's their worst case scenario. And why are we getting this stagflation scenario? Well, because of the uncertainty of the tariffs. Everyone has stopped making spending decisions, or they're delaying them, and this is starting to affect the economic growth numbers. At the same time, as the tariffs are hitting prices, prices are going up, and price expectations of companies and households are also going up. And what has been the White House response? Well, a two-pronged one. One, the usual bullying and blaming someone else for what's happening. And the second one is China is going to have to buckle as they're about to get hit harder than the United States. Prices have started rising, and one analysis of the products sold on Amazon showed that its sellers have started hiking prices on nearly 1,000 of the top 100,000 selling products on the site, with an average price hike of about 30% so far. Then, a story leaked that Amazon had a proposal where consumers would be told, well, you know the reason why the price is going up is because of the tariff rise. The Trump administration went absolutely ballistic. The White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, called the proposed displaying of the tariff charges on these imported goods as a hostile and political act.
So it was reported this morning that Amazon will soon display a little number next to the price of each product that shows how much the Trump tariffs are adding to the cost of each product.
Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon.
Amazon very quickly backed out of the suggestion when President Trump spoke with Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, who you may remember, along with his fiancée, was one of the billionaire tech guests on his inauguration day. The president later told reporters about the call to the e-commerce tech giant. And he said Jeff Bezos was very nice, he was terrific, he solved the problem very quickly, and he did the right thing, i.e. he hid the tariff charges inside the pricing of the good. President Trump now enjoys the dubious distinction of notching up the worst first 100-day performance of the S&P 500 stock index of any president in 5 decades. Trump, however, has blamed the fallout of the stock market and the downturn in the economy on the Biden administration. He posted on his own social media platform, Truth Social, I didn't take over until January the 20th. Tariffs will soon start kicking in, and companies are starting to move in the United States in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang. This will take a while and has nothing to do with tariffs, only that he left us with bad numbers. But when the boom begins, it will be like no other. Be patient, he tells all his fellow Americans.
That's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this is quarterly numbers.
However, China should also not sit on its laurels. The United States may have started this trade war, the tariffs, but it hurts people in both countries. One estimate by Goldman Sachs shows that over 20 million workers in China are exposed to the US exports. And if the full tariffs stay for a long period of time, it would wipe out over 50% of Chinese exports to the United States. China does not have a strong welfare system to look after many of these people. And in the past, workers have often driven any political dissent in the country. According to the Freedom House, over 40% of the in-person and online protests that happen in China were done by the workers. The new generation of the Chinese youth have grown up in a prosperous China, and they've not seen the poverty levels that used to exist in the past, because it was all eliminated from the country by the time most of them have grown up. Now for China, it should also use this as a moment of self-reflection. It's important given it is the world's superpower when it comes to manufacturing, if nothing else. Its actions during the COVID pandemic when it shut down the country and kept it closed for months on end, brought up genuine issues of supply chain vulnerabilities for many nations across the world. It emphasized and highlighted the vulnerability to those countries that because of China's own policy, they chose to close down. So now we should not be surprised that nations wish to ensure that they don't want to put themselves in that position again. Do share with me your thoughts on how soon you think the US-China will sit down for trade talks, if at all, and what may push either country towards compromise. Thanks for reaching this far, and do subscribe to the channel and have a great day.